In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif, Thulin, and I, we are going to share our thoughts on prospects whose teams are on the bubble and how they can improve their draft stock and possibly save their team season this week. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board, and my co-host for today is Leif, Thulin, the guy that watches more college basketball than anyone else. On one hand, it's exciting because there's so many games and it's conference tournament time. But then on the other hand, for a guy like Leif, you have to wonder, like, what is he going to do when college basketball is over, because he spends so much time watching college basketball. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by Nissan. Because the question is, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, take the Nissan Rogue and go find your next big adventure. So check it out at nissanusa.com. And if you are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can get notifications every time we post, because we are your source for NBA draft content 5 days a week. All right, Leif. Conference tournament starts. Some have already started. The bigger conferences have started today, but tomorrow a lot of the bigger teams will play. What has been the biggest surprise to you so far?
Well, I love the mid-majors in the early week, so I wasn't necessarily surprised by too many of the results, but the competitiveness always is impressive. When Drake and Indiana State got together and it was an 18-point game, you're like, oh, Drake's cruising. And then all of a sudden, the Sycamores came back. That was my favorite game so far, but this is a great week. And to answer your earlier question is, what do I do once college basketball ends? I'm a little sad for a bit, and then I start probably watching more college basketball again. I just watch it from the film perspective and see if there's any games I missed or any fun games to rewatch. And then the playoffs start. So I got enough basketball for myself.
Okay. I was just wondering, what are you doing with your spare time? I know you like to hoop. And so I'm wondering, are you just playing more basketball? All right, before we
Oh,
get into this episode, who is the prospect that you like the most whose season is already over because their team has been eliminated in conference play?
well, Isaiah Collier has a chance. He's got a slim chance if they win the Pac-12, but they have to beat Arizona, which they did the other day. But I think that's kind of like you woke up the bear a little bit. So Isaiah Collier is probably the most highly regarded prospect whose season is likely on life support. They have to win the Pac-12 conference tournament, and they play Arizona in the second round. They have to win the first round to get to the second round. So he would be the number one guy, but he's starting to play better, and a lot of people, including myself, kind of turned south on him at the start of the year, the inefficiency, the turnovers, but he's starting to play better. And you see some of those flashes of why he was compared to guys like Tyreek Evans and just pure scores that weren't necessarily quite shooters, but you can't get enough of the way how smooth he is scoring the ball. Like his opening game against Kansas State, we sat here and talked, we're like, well, that guy looked like an NBA player, and now you're seeing it again.
Yep. Was there anybody who's already been eliminated so far that is someone that you're really high on?
No one that I'm super high on. I think a player locally is Dylan Jones. They lost last night, Weber State, that is, and he's someone that I know a lot of people have crack in the first round. I'm not as high as some on him, but he's definitely a player that deserves to be on big boards, and it would put up staggering numbers in the Big Sky.
Do you think he should have won Player of the Year in that conference?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because I know St. Thomas was probably the biggest competitor. He's out. And so it's like you got the two best players in that conference are already out, and their seasons are likely over. Talking a little bit about Collier, I think he's really helped his draft stock since he's returned from the hand injury. One of the things that I like the most about him and his return is that, one, he cut his turnovers down, and two, he still played his aggressive style of basketball. It reminds me of Cole Anthony a few years ago. North Carolina was done; they weren't good. He had I know it was a knee injury, something like that. I don't know if it was a meniscus, but he came back and played when he could have easily shut it down. And I think for Collier, he could have easily just decided, The season isn't going anywhere. I don't know what I can do with my draft stock. I've already kind of hurt it a little bit with my play. And the fact that he came back, even though it was a hand injury, he came back and played. And he's trying to save the season when he could have easily mailed it in. And I know people say, well, that's what he's supposed to do. But in this day and age, when a lot of players are looking to protect their draft stock, it's not unheard of for a guy to shut it down.
Yeah, I think he should be applauded for coming back and playing at all, especially the start of the season wasn't easy for him. Like if he'd had a good start, I wonder how that would have changed the process. But a lot of players are like, oh, I can win it over with my pro day, that type of process. And that's true. We've seen players like Shaden Sharp. He's been very good. And like the seventh pick of the draft a few years ago, he didn't play at all. He didn't do any workouts. Like that's not something that I want to see continue to be the norm. And you're starting to see more mandatory players have to play at the combine. But a player coming back and playing for a team that's not been very good needs to be applauded. And like I think we need to reiterate what you said. Like he's still playing his aggressive style of basketball and he's cut down the turnovers. Like
Yeah.
he started the year starting with like six turnovers, but he had a nice 7 of 9 shooting, so we kind of tossed it away. But then the turnovers became the narrative. Well, recently he's played games with under he had 3 turnovers in 4 straight games, but his volume's ridiculous. He also went 14 of 20, scoring 31 points with no free throws added. And typically, I like when a guard gets to the free throw line. I know you do as well. But the fact he was able to do so efficiently and playing his aggressive ball means there's more craftiness to his bag than maybe the brute force would indicate that he plays with at times. But the aggressive natures and ability to come back and play after an injury is something I want to applaud.
Yeah, his first game back, he was 12 of 16 from the foul line. And then the next game, even though missing 7 free throws is it's not a good thing, but he went to the foul line 15 times. So that's what 31 free throw attempts in 2 games, which
Mhm.
there are guys that, are projected high picks that won't go to the free throw line 31 times in a month. But you have to, like I said, I like the aggressive nature. The 3-point shooting hasn't been great, but he's shown some flashes. Like the one game he was 2 for 3, 2 for 5, he had a 3 for 5 game. I think there's promise for him as a shooter. I know he's not shooting the ball well. Like when you look at the stats, it's like 33% from three, but that's not incredibly bad, especially for a guy who the way he's built and the way he's played, he never really had to shoot jumpers on the high school level. And I feel like if you were like an AAU coach or a high school coach, and if Isaiah Collier was shooting jump shots, you were applauding and clapping because he was bailing your basically, he was helping you out. And so I think like for him, the lack of shooting comes from he never had to shoot. He always was able to get to his spots when he wanted to on the youth levels. And so I think the free throw shooting will come along. The 67% from the foul line is okay, but I do think that he can improve as a shooter. It may not be like in year one or year two, but I do think that he can develop into a respectable shooter.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say I think he's going to be a very good shooter, but I think the fact that he's taking those mid-range jump shots with confidence will extend to the 3-point line in time.
Yeah, I think he's a much better shooter, like off the dribble as far as rhythm than off the catch. But it's gonna be important for him to develop some type of jumper off the catch, especially if he goes to a team where he's gonna have to split some ball handling duties. All right, when we return, we're gonna talk about a few other prospects that could help their draft stock by saving their team season. But before we get into that, let's talk about better help. Because BetterHelp is one of the sponsors of the show, and sometimes we all need an opportunity to get something off of our chest, whether it's big or small. There are certain things that can really start to get to you, and it is very important for you to get it out your system, especially if you can talk to someone who is unbiased in your life. Therapy can be for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get the things off your chest every once in a while. So if you are thinking about starting therapy, you have to give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It is designed to be flexible and it's designed to be suited to fit your schedule. So visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba and you can get 10% off your first month. That is betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week streaming channel on YouTube, and it is now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories of the day with our local experts, plus the Locked On national shows that cover every league. So find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, second segment. This is Rafael Barlowe with Leif, Thulin, and we are talking about prospects whose teams are on the bubble, or probably not even on the bubble, but if they can have a strong conference tournament, they can possibly save their season and also improve their draft stock. All right, who is the next player that comes to mind after Isaiah Collier?
I don't know how much he helps his draft stock, which is already high, but Cody Williams in the Pac-12 tournament has a true bubble team. Colorado did themselves favors this past weekend in Oregon. They beat Oregon and Oregon State on the road and have themselves kind of in that last four in, first four out situation. Cody Williams missed those games. He's projected to play in the Pac-12 tournament. I don't know if his fit with the Buffaloes works that well. Sometimes they play better with him. Sometimes they play better without him. But he's got a pretty safe stock as one of the top 10 picks. But I think if he's to help them and maybe make a splash in the Pac-12 tournament, that could put some more eyes on him. Say, oh, in a meaningful game, Cody Williams was able to impact it, controlling pace, getting to the rim, and some things he's struggled to do against some of the bigger and stronger teams.
What are your thoughts on that Colorado team that it's not far-fetched to say they could have three guys selected in the top 40. To me, this team has underachieved. I know injuries have played a significant role in Cody missing games, but what is your thoughts on that team and their record despite, the talent on their roster?
Yeah, I think they definitely underachieved. I think Tristan da Silva has been all Pac-12 before. This year he was second team. KJ Simpson was a first teamer as it was announced earlier today. And then Cody Williams is arguably the best college basketball NBA prospect. So they didn't play that well as a team. I think they didn't quite mesh the way you'd expect. But I think part of the issue is Cody Williams wants the ball in his hands. Da Silva can play off the ball, but KJ Simpson needs the ball in his hands. And I don't think he's necessarily a point guard. I think he's more of a two guard. And that hindered Cody from making the splash that us as draft junkies really wanted to see. But I still think you can project all the skills of what Cody Williams does when he has the ball in his hands forward. And I'm still pretty high on him.
What are your thoughts on him as a playmaker? If I'm not mistaken, I'm pulling up the stats here. He averages more turnovers than assists. Do you think that's a concern, or do you think the playmaking is legit? Because I'm torn on it.
I think the potential to play make is good. I think a lot of the issues he has are when he over penetrates to the paint and he's not physically strong enough to go up and he gets stripped or he makes bailout passes that are kind of related to lack of physicality. I think he's got a more physical growth dependent need than a lot of these players where typically you're like, oh, they need to mentally grow their game or there's this step that they need. I think he has some of those, but most pertinent thing that he has to improve to me is just gain some strength, play more physically, and be less reliant on guile, because he's got the athletic traits to use that size and coordination to make himself into a very good NBA player. And I still think he'll likely be my top collegiate prospect, him or Rob Dillingham.
Okay. All right, we can talk about Rob and Reed Shepard on another time at another episode. Who is another player that comes to mind that is a prospect whose team is on the bubble that you would love to see him or his team basically extend their season?
This is going to be an interesting one. I don't think you'll expect. I'm going to go with Ryan Dunn of Virginia.
Okay.
Ryan Dunn got a lot of love early in the season. I watch a lot of Virginia. I know a couple guys with the program. And so I knew about Ryan Dunn. I think I said in a podcast a long time ago, I really liked him. That
Yep.
said, I've kind of cooled off. I don't see the offense translating. And if you were to look at the like top end skills, if you could project one player's top end skills, he might have the top skill in this draft just with his on-ball defense, his ability to be versatile defensively. But offensively, he's really, really struggled in ACC play. He can't overwhelm athletes the way he could and attack the rim or attack the glass on offense. And his shot is far from real at all. So if he can help Virginia into the tournament and maybe just have a defensive stopper performance on a big time player, a big name player, perhaps, I think that could help his stock. But I've actually got him pretty low down my board, even though last summer I was very early on the Ryan Dunn train. So it sucks to kind of have those ebbs and flows, but I think he's a guy that could help his team and their true bubble team.
Yeah, he, in my opinion, is going to have to find a role as a small ball center in the NBA. I think if he's in a situation where he's the role man and vertical lob threat, I think there's a way for him to contribute on offense. But 21% from three, well, I'll give him the bump. It's 21.9, so I'll bump it up to 22. 22% from three, 53% from the foul line. He just didn't make the jump from shooting that we expected. And actually, he's like went in reverse as far as shooting. I thought last year he showed some promise. It wasn't on a great volume of attempts, but I thought there was some promise of being a shooter. But 22% is pretty difficult. All right, who's another prospect that you would like to basically see extend his season?
This is another guy I'm not overly high on, but Kel'el Ware has a chance to prolong Indiana's season. I do think they're on the outside looking in. Just if we're going to go off where they are right now, they'd have to win a couple games in the Big Ten tournament. But he's a guy that I've been lower on throughout the process last year and this year. But I will admit he got all defense this year. He looked more engaged under Mike Woodson, and you've seen flashes of 3-point shooting on decent volume. He's shooting 45% on
Yep.
1.4 attempts per game, which is not a ton of volume. But if you watch the way that Indiana plays with two bigs, it's not exactly his role. He and Malik Renew share that interior, and he's helped anchor a much improved Indiana defense. The last 4 games of the season, Indiana's defense has looked far better, and I think that has a lot to do with Ware playing more engaged basketball and knowing how to defend some of these players that were at one point new to him.
I have Kel'el Ware as a top 10 pick. This draft is full of uncertainty. And in my opinion, I'm a swing for the fences guy. Why not take a what 7-footer that's shooting 45% from three, averaging 16 and was it 16 and 10? Something. I mean, round up the numbers. He had a game against Wisconsin where he was 11 of 12 from the floor. I think in the NBA when he's in a reduced role where he's not the feature guy, if his job is just to rebound, be a vertical lob threat, block shots, I think he's going to be fine. So I think that I think he's addressed some of the concerns about the motor and the activity. I also feel like if he had the same season he had this year, if he has it last year as a freshman, how high would he have gone in that draft? I mean, he would have went really high. He's still young. He is still 19. He's only going to be 20 on draft day. And he's just in this weird situation where he came back to school, he improved, and I don't think it's done much for his draft stock, at least on like mock drafts and big boards that I've seen. But like I said, this draft is full of uncertainty. And if you're going to take a chance on a guy, why not take a chance on a 7-footer that can potentially space the floor, protect the rim, and it could be like your vertical lob threat. So I'm a little bit higher on Kel'el than the consensus right now.
I like that logic, and I think a lot of my negativity on him came in even before Oregon last year. I felt like a lot of those clips were kind of exactly that. They were highlights as opposed to consistency. And when I've watched Indiana, the team has lost a lot of games where he's had his personal best games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of those games are harder to glean how good he was on the defensive end because he'll put up a few blocks, but I watch him play, and at the end of games, I think in a big centric league in the Big Ten where a lot of the best players are bigs, he hasn't stood out to me at the level that I'd want him to if I were to be drafting in the lottery. But I think talent wise, he's definitely up there in the class where I tend to agree with you. Swinging for the fences is the way I lean, especially in a draft in which there seems to be a noticeable lack of top tier talent.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I'm swinging for the fences. And I think some of the disappointment a little bit is because he had so much hype after, I think it was the McDonald's practices, that he had a big buzz and he just didn't live up to it after his freshman year. All right. When we return, we're going to wrap up this episode with a few more prospects who are on bubble teams. But before we get into that, let's talk about Nissan, because Nissan wants to know, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. And the 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. It has class executive Google built in, which is always updating and assistant to call for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone with the Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store. They are all built right into the 12.3-inch HD screen and infotainment system. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. And then there's also the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8. It has an expansive cargo capacity, an advanced available 4x4 capability. It also has 284 horsepower and can tow up to 6,000 pounds. So when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue or the Nissan Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right, last segment, rounding out or wrapping up this episode. Just name a couple other guys who are on bubble teams that are some top prospects that we could possibly see them for the last time this week.
Devin Carter is not the most popular name, but if you were to look at production alone this season, he should be among the very highest in terms of, hey, he does it offensively, does it defensively, scores, defends your top player, rebounds the ball as a guard, and he is on a true bubble team in Providence. I think Providence needs to upset Creighton in order to make it to the big dance. His running mate Bryce Hopkins got hurt, who had more acclaim nationally coming into this year, and that's elevated Devin Carter's stats, but also status. And I really think there's a chance that Devin Carter cracks the top 20 and maybe the lottery just off of sheer productivity and the value of players performing immediately on their rookie deals, because he's a veteran player who can do it on both ends.
I think I saw it was Bleacher Report that had him in their top 10.
Yeah, that seems
He,
a little high to me, but I like him.
yeah, unless it's a team like, I don't know, a team that ends up in the top 10 with a multiple picks or they're close. I mean, you look at the Thunder, even though, I mean, they already have a bunch of guys, they have multiple picks. The top 10 is I think generous, especially when you consider that usually teams use their lottery picks on young players with high upside. But he is the one guy that I guess statistically, as far as like combining like defense as a guard, is he like the closest to Craig Porter from last year?
I think so. I mean, I think everyone talks about Reed Shepherd as in being this amazing defender, but if you were to like look at an actual comparison for Derek White, I think Devin Carter is a far better comparison for Derek White, even though that's the one that Reed Shepherd keeps getting labeled with.
I I've seen that somebody mentioned Malcolm Brogdon, Reed Shepherd, and I know this could be considered a lazy comparison because it's a white player to a white player. Why can't Reed Shepherd be like Mark Price? I know that was before your time. I think when you were born, Mark Price was probably on
I
the
had him
golf
on.
course
I had him
somewhere.
as my basketball cards. I know Mark Price.
Okay, I know you're a historian. I didn't want to doubt that, but I know like Mark Price was early 90s, but maybe it's the same haircut, but I see some similarities, and I think Mark Price would like really thrive in today's NBA where point guards have a little bit more freedom and can shoot the ball. But Mark Price was really good. He's just more so known for being like the best player in those Cavs teams that couldn't get by Michael Jordan. But yeah, Carter has played well. I like the fact that he is a point guard shot blocker, and that's where the Craig Porter comparison came. I know at one point he was averaging over a block per game, which is incredible for a guard. Do you think that he is the prospect that has gained the most? I think like it's between him or maybe like Hunter Salas, guys that have like literally come out of nowhere and have played themselves into a first round pick. I mean, you can throw Dotson Connect in there,
Yeah,
but I feel
that's
like
the only other one I was gonna think of as Connect, and then you could argue someone like Misi or Furphy who had later blooming periods, even though they were younger.
yep,
But in terms of the college production, it's got to be Connect or Carter.
yep. Is there any other players that are on bubble teams that are legitimate top 40 prospects?
Salas, I think Wake's probably on the outside looking in, and we've talked about him before, and he's a really talented player, a really good athlete that came out of Nebraska and went to Gonzaga and was a top 10 guy, and he got buried on the bench playing the wrong position. He was playing two guard when he's frankly a one, and he was out of position. Now he's getting a chance to score the basketball and showcase some of those playmaking chops and that athleticism. It's interesting if you were to like use those two as foils for one another. Devin Carter isn't quite the athlete that Salas is. He's not quite the shooter in terms of like what you would have expected coming out of high school. But Devin Carter is kind of this rugged competitor. I wish Salas had a little more of the rugged competitor side because I think his athletic traits lend him to be a good defender, but I don't see it as much on Wake Forest. Maybe that's just because of the shouldering, the load he does scoring, but that's what makes Carter so appealing to me is that he does it offensively and defensively, and you can pencil him into different roles as a prospect. So if I were to compare those two, which I know are different prospects, but they're both upperclassmen, I prefer Carter.
Yeah, Hunter's having a good year. 18 points per game, a little under 50% from the floor, 41% from three, a little under 80% from the foul line. But those losses after the Duke game just killed Wake Forest's momentum. And it's like they can't win on the road. Like they're tough at home. But who they lose to? Notre Dame, Georgia Tech by 1 point, and it was another game that they lost. And I think if they would have capitalized on those games after the Duke win, I think they wouldn't be in this bubble situation. So I'm a little biased. I'm from Omaha. I've mentioned it before. I've known Hunter's family before he was even before he was even born, and I talked to his mom quite frequently. So selfishly, I'm hoping for them to get into the tournament. And I actually even wrote right after the Duke game that Wake Forest has done an excellent job with transfers from Jake LaRavia to Alondes Williams, but Hunter was going to be the one to lead them to the NCAA tournament, and now I got to keep my fingers crossed to hope that comes true. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Leif is going to be back on a lot more because now this is his time. This is go time for Leif. We're going to talk a lot about the NCAA tournament. Of course, we're going to talk about the conference tournaments before that. So stay tuned to the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Richard Stayman will be on the next episode, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the conference tournaments this week. Once again, it's Rafael with Leif Thulin, and we are